Will globalization turn the world upside down? Is Asia in concert or in division?
China's economy is slowing down, but should it be? If the economy revolves around technology, how will technology change the world?
We ask politicians, entrepreneurs, thinkers, and creators for answers that will shape our future. Join CGTN special coverage in Boao.
Asia is in the forefront of digitization, and the digital revolution bring new growth patterns to the world. We will wait and see.
Breaking news on CGTN.
Traveled to places where others couldn't be, seen things others couldn't imagine, and heard stories you can't be sure whether to believe. They say that you're privileged, that people look up to you, but only you know how much effort you've made. You're on the ultimate journey to discover a country with 5,000 years of history and nearly 1.5 billion people. Is it a green countryside or a vast sea of neon lights and skyscrapers? Is it a dangerous land choked with smog or the blue sky of a summer's day? What is this China for you? And what is this China for the rest of the world? CGTN. See the difference.
Will globalization turn the world upside down? Is Asia in concert or in division?
China's economy is slowing down, but should it be? If the economy revolves around technology, how will technology change the world?
We ask politicians, entrepreneurs, thinkers, and creators for answers that will shape our future. Join CGTN special coverage in Boao.
Asia is in the forefront of digitization, and the digital revolution bring new growth patterns to the world. We will wait and see.
Breaking news on CGTN.
Traveled to places where others couldn't be, seen things others couldn't imagine, and heard stories you can't be sure whether to believe. They say that you're privileged, that people look up to you, but only you know how much effort you've made. You're on the ultimate journey to discover a country with 5,000 years of history and nearly 1.5 billion people. Is it a green countryside or a vast sea of neon lights and skyscrapers? Is it a dangerous land choked with smog or the blue sky of a summer's day? What is this China for you? And what is this China for the rest of the world? CGTN. See the difference.
Will globalization turn the world upside down?
Is Asia in concert or in division?
China's economy is slowing down, but should it be? If the economy revolves around technology, how does technology change the world?
We ask politicians, entrepreneurs, thinkers, and creators for answers that will shape our future. Join CGTN special coverage in Boao.
Asia is in the forefront of digitization, and it is that revolution bring new growth paths to Khor. We will wait and see.
Breaking news on CGTN.
Traveled to places where others couldn't be, seen things others couldn't imagine, and heard stories you can't be sure whether to believe. They say that you're privileged, that people look up to you, but only you know how much effort you've made. You're on the ultimate journey to discover a country with 5,000 years of history and nearly 1.5 billion people. Is it a green countryside or a vast sea of neon lights and skyscrapers? Is it a dangerous land choked with smog or the blue sky of a summer's day? What is this China for you? And what is this China for the rest of the world? CGTN. See the difference.
Will globalization turn the world upside down?
Is Asia in concert or in division?
China's economy is slowing down, but should it be? If the economy revolves around technology, how does technology change the world?
We ask politicians, entrepreneurs, thinkers, and creators for answers that will shape our future. Join CGTN special coverage in Boao.
Asia is in the forefront of digitization, and the digital revolution bring new growth patterns to the world. We will wait and see.
traveled to places where others couldn't be, seen things others couldn't imagine, and heard stories you can't be sure whether to believe. They say that you're privileged, that people look up to you, but only you know how much effort you've made. You're on the ultimate journey to discover a country with 5,000 years of history and nearly 1.5 billion people. Is it a green countryside or a vast sea of neon lights and skyscrapers? Is it a dangerous land choked with smog or the blue sky of a summer's day? What is this China for you? And what is this China for the rest of the world? CGTN. See the difference.
Will globalization turn the world upside down?
Is Asia in concert or in division?
China's economy is slowing down, but should it be? If the economy revolves around technology, how does technology change the world?
We ask politicians, entrepreneurs, thinkers, and creators for answers that will shape our future. Join CGTN special coverage in Boao.
Asia is in the forefront of digitization, and the digital revolution will bring new growth patterns to the world. We will wait and see.
Breaking news on CGTN.
Places where others couldn't be, seen things others couldn't imagine, and heard stories you can't be sure whether to believe. They say that you're privileged, that people look up to you, but only you know how much effort you've made. You're on the ultimate journey to discover a country with 5,000 years of history and nearly 1.5 billion people. Is it a green countryside or a vast sea of neon lights and skyscrapers? Is it a dangerous land choked with smog or the blue sky of a summer's day? What is this China for you? And what is this China for the rest of the world? CGTN. See the difference.
Will globalization turn the world upside down?
Is Asia in concert or in division?
China's economy is slowing down, but should it be? If the economy revolves around technology, how does technology change the world?
We ask politicians, entrepreneurs, thinkers, and creators for answers that will shape our future. Join CGTN special coverage in Boao.
Asia is in the forefront of digitization, and the digital revolution will bring new growth patterns to the world. We will wait and see.
where others couldn't be, seen things others couldn't imagine, and heard stories you can't be sure whether to believe. They say that you're privileged, that people look up to you, but only you know how much effort you've made. You're on the ultimate journey to discover a country with 5,000 years of history and nearly 1.5 billion people. Is it a green countryside or a vast sea of neon lights and skyscrapers? Is it a dangerous land choked with smog or the blue sky of a summer's day? What is this China for you? And what is this China for the rest of the world? CGTN. See the difference.
Will globalization turn the world upside down?
Is Asia in concert or in division?
China's economy is slowing down, but should it be? If the economy revolves around technology, how will technology change the world?
We ask politicians, entrepreneurs, thinkers, and creators for answers that will shape our future. Join CGTN special coverage in Boao.
Asia is in the forefront of digitization, and the digital revolution bring new growth patterns to the world. We will wait and see.
Breaking news on CGTN.
这场论坛 CGTN 将提供 5G 支持的全景 VR 直播，各位可以通过 CGTN 的 Facebook、Twitter、YouTube、微博的官方账号，就是 CGTN@CGTN 观看我们360度全景直播，或者可以扫屏幕上的二维码进入我们的全景直播。Ladies and gentlemen, CGTN will be providing fully interactive 5G supported VR live streaming for this session. You can join via our social handles on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube and Weibo, or scan the QR code on the screen right now to join the session interactively. Thank you and enjoy the session.
Sorry?
I don't know how we are.
You want to keep this? You can keep it.
Please, go ahead.
1、2、3、4，1、2、3、4 ，testing testing。
Thank you very much.
OK， 很好，谢谢。是不是热一下场啊 ？OK, ladies and gentlemen, can I have your attention, please？观众朋友们，欢迎来到我们博1年1度的对话思想者。Upon the request of the organization, we need to have something to warm up the atmosphere at the very beginning. We need to, and first of all, in the role of a cheerleader, we need to have some applause to tape the warm response from the audiences. Now, I give you the countdown and we start the warm applause. Thank you for the support and understanding. 接下来我们要 热场，要录一段观众们的热烈鼓掌，请配合一下我好吗 ？Thank you so much. I'm first of all the cheerleader, and then the second leader will be the moderator. Welcome. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Thank you. I like it. It's a good beginning. 好。Welcome back to our annual Dialogue with the Thinkers at Boao in Hainan. I'm the host, Yang Rui. Digital Asia rises fast and starts to impact the world economy as some major member states are anxious to talk about digital economy at the WTO. Big data, artificial intelligence, cloud computing, and global supply chains will sustain China's innovation and growth. The fourth industrialization based on digital technology is gaining momentum. Today, I'm very happy to be joined here on the panel by Mr. Diwakar Gupta, Vice President for Private Sector and Co-Financing Operations of the Asian Development Bank, Vincent Hong-sui, Chairman of the Shui Group, Khor, Chief Economist of the ASEAN Plus 3 Macroeconomic Research Office, Dame Jen Shipley, former Prime Minister of New Zealand, and Mr. Carlos Gutierrez, Chairman of Albright Stonebridge Group and former U.S. Secretary of Commerce. That's our topic. This is Dialogue. I'm Yang Rui. Asia, a vibrant economy, is undergoing dynamic transformation. Digital technology is bringing new vitality and innovation to the region and beyond. Today, we, China Global Television Network, officially launched the Digital Asia Report at the Boao Forum for Asia. What does Digital Asia mean for us? Let's look at this. I'm an Asian industrial robot. This is my whole industry chain. You can see me almost everywhere in Asia. Asian industrial robots accounted for 65% of robot usage globally in 2017. Asian manufacturers supply a high proportion of robots to the world. My prosperity comes with the development of the digital economy, which has promoted productivity and innovation in the manufacturing industry. The digital economy has boosted the Asian economy for the past 20 years and contributes almost one-third of Asia's annual economic growth. How did the whole industry chain of the digital economy become the engine of Asia's economic growth? Because Asia is the world's largest continent with huge markets and domestic demand from over 4 billion people. We are active in various industries including automobiles, electronics, metalwork, plastics, and more. Asia's growth momentum has benefited the world. The contribution of Asia's GDP to global GDP rose from 14% in 1960 to 35% in 2018. Asia also has a high year-on-year growth rate, 8 percentage points above the world's average in 2010. The proportion of Asia's trade volume to the global volume rose from 1/4 in 2001 to over a third in 2016. Asia is in the forefront of digitization. But what are the concerns over the potential for mass unemployment brought by the rise of the digital economy? Can the digital revolution bring new growth patterns to the world? What does the future hold for Asia? We will wait and see. Welcome to our dialogue here. Ladies and gentlemen, as our video pointed out, there are concerns over mass unemployment and a widening gap among countries brought by the rise of a digital economy. How valid are those concerns, and how would you respond to these fears and concerns? We start from Madame Shipley.
Goodness. Look, I think we can be anxious, but I think we can also be hopeful. And I want to move to the hopeful step immediately because I think it's a key. The digital economy is going to, for example, allow inclusive finance that will connect people to the real economy in a way that the traditional economy has not. There have been many, many people who've never been able to open a bank account. But today, what you earn rather than what you own will determine whether you can borrow money and participate in the real economy. So I, for one, I'm watching not only Alibaba with Alipay, but the banks here in China are very advanced, far further advanced than the West, in allowing people who, if you can demonstrate you've got a pattern of earnings or behaviour, and the data is there to record that, then decisions can be made rapidly and in a way that supports your next decision. So the next step of microfinance, enabling this through data, I think is a key to inclusion and the reduction of inequity. And I think that while employment is a complex side effect, I think this may well offset it to some extent.
Mr. Gutierrez?
You know, I agree with Prime Minister Shipley. There are important benefits. But I think we also need to be talking about the negatives, the downsides. These technologies are beginning to come to life, but they haven't hit at scale yet. When they do, there will be a lot of displaced workers. And I think we should focus on the workers, not the jobs, because the jobs will change. The industries will change. We can't cling to industries of the past. I'll tell you, speaking from my country, there isn't enough of a national dialogue. How are we going to retrain people? Are we going to set up retraining centers throughout the country? Right now, the private sector is taking the lead. But that is something that if we don't start now, the benefits that the Prime Minister talked about could be offset by millions of people looking for work. So I think we have to focus on both.
We need to focus on the issue of unemployment, the relationship between the use of digital technology and the creation of jobs, or in Gutierrez's words, we need to look at the workers instead of smartphones and digital technology. But Vincent, you come from Hong Kong, a vibrant economy. What do you think of the prospects of unemployment? We have the hopefuls and the negatives. Would you end up making a compromise?
In Hong Kong, we have actually over full employment at this stage because Hong Kong is evolving itself into a commercial hub for China. In the past 40 years, it's bringing money into China. But in the future, it's bringing money out of China. And I think Hong Kong really has a full agenda. But we just need to also upgrade our own economy. Right? It's no longer just doing simple finance or real estate. We now have to be playing more of an integrator role.
We have a chief economist who represents the ASEAN Plus 3 macroeconomic research. Now, the population in India, China, and ASEAN combined account for almost 50% of the world's total of 7 billion. That's a lot in terms of big data, a market for the big data. So what do you think of the prospects for the job market when we have this rapid development and evolving concept of the digital economy?
Thank you. Well, first, let me thank you for inviting us to the forum. Actually, our focus is more on East Asia, but, I think East Asia is very enthusiastic about the new technology, and they have been embracing the new technology much more than other parts of the world. As you mentioned, there's a risk involved because the technology is disruptive, right? It basically changes the way business model works, the way you conduct business. I mean, the obvious one is in the factory, where automation, robotics is taking over, and it's reducing employment. So, I think a lot of the countries in the region, particularly those which are focused on manufacturing sector, they are very concerned about this. And I think almost all the countries in the region come up with plans to how to move and take advantage of the new industrial revolution. So in Thailand, for instance, you have Industry 4.0, right? Malaysia also has its own plan. And in the case of the Philippines, which is a service economy, they're also worried about the new technology, affecting the BPO industry. Because a lot of the BPO is call center, and over time we know that, you're going to have robots taking over a lot of that function. So they are trying to move towards KPO, knowledge process outsourcing. So, and my sense is that, the new services that's created by technology is going to be much greater than the disruption or the reduction in employment. So I'm actually very optimistic that if we can sort of manage the risk in terms of the unemployment, the retrenchment, the new technology on balance is going to be very positive for the region.
Mr. Gupta, what would be the focus of your diligence report when you look for opportunities, investment in infrastructure? For example, we are talking about unemployment, the possible relationship between big data, digital technology, and the huge population in Asia. How do you define digital Asia in this context?
Okay, so just rewinding to the overall question of digital technologies impacting employment. If you look at the world 100 years ago or 200 years ago, obviously technology has overtaken populations very comprehensively every 30, 40, 50 years. And in those 50 years, it was very hard to imagine what it would be. The good news is that it's just that we end up doing a lot more. So you have millions of people traveling today, which was not happening in 1900, and I think that's the value add which will continue to create jobs. Now, to the point that Mr. Gutierrez made, we have to talk about reskilling because jobs will change, and to some extent that itself is a black box because we don't know what's the pace of technological change and what we should be retraining people for. But I think the good thing is, as they say, you can order a pizza on the internet, you can't have it delivered on the internet.
Follow-up question, Mr. Gupta, is jobs will change. Will jobs be lost? Will people be made redundant?
Personally, if I look back, I'm very hopeful that won't be the case. What will those jobs look like? We will need to, sort of crystal ball gaze and prepare populations for it. But one thing that definitely will happen is the hollowing out of the middle. So automation will take up all the normally easy to do jobs in the middle. You will either have the hard to automate jobs at the lower end or the hard to automate jobs at the higher end, which means profits of companies will flow into balance sheets and into shareholders rather than being paid out as wages. So I think one very big thing that governments will have to do is to find redistributive mechanisms by which these profits are then channelized for the public good to those people who have been affected by the hollowed out middle.
Vitality and the competitive edge of SMEs, non-private private economy in China mean a lot for the creation of jobs. Premier Li Keqiang said in his government work report at the opening ceremony of the annual NPC session, Mr. Vincent Low, among the 6 factors of stabilization, or the other way around, job creation is listed as the most important by President Xi Jinping. What does the economic slowdown in China mean for this powerhouse that used to contribute up to 30% to the world economy, the Chinese economy?
The slowdown, I think it means that young people looking for jobs will be more difficult. And every year there's 9 million graduates that come into the job market. And in China, the one-child policy, if you have a son or daughter and not be able to find jobs, I think the parents or the grandparents will all be very upset, and I think that will create a lot of social problems. So that is why I think the Prime Minister has made job security, that's the key to China's own stability at this point in time.
I'd like to have a debate between Mr. Gutierrez and Vincent, and if possible others would join the debate about whether the presidency of Donald Trump will help bring back big data people, I mean talented professionals from the Silicon Valley, because the White House is so concerned about having Chinese students doing research in digital area, engineering, high technology. So will that help bring back Chinese students and scholars to enhance our pool of talented professionals? Vincent, is this a more of an opportunity or would add to the tensions between the two biggest economies?
I think that's great opportunity for the Chinese working in Silicon Valley, right? China is now developing very fast, especially on the technology side. So if they come back, I think there's a huge market for them to work with. And I think that will be really good, actually not just for China, for the world as well.
So what you are saying suggests this is not necessarily a game of zero-sum competition.
No, it's not.
Mr. Gutierrez?
Yes, we often talk in the U.S. About the problem with manufacturing, and the culprits are trade and immigration. Actually, it's technology. So the reason that some jobs have been lost in manufacturing is already related to technology. The key, as you said, is SMEs and promoting incentives for companies to innovate. Regrettably, our agenda has been trade. Our agenda has been immigration. So we don't have enough people entering the workforce in order to grow. An economy grows with the number of workers and their productivity. So we run the risk of R&D centers moving to Canada, and even farms moving to Mexico. So without immigration, we cannot compete. 40% of Silicon Valley companies were founded by foreigners. And that tells you right there how much we rely on high-skilled immigration. So I think it's a real shame what's happening today.
When we look at the percentage or population of Asians in the Silicon Valley, do we have more Indians or Chinese?
I don't. I saw a statistic the other day that worried me, that the interchange of students, Chinese students going to the U.S. has declined by 25%. That will hurt the U.S. because many of those Chinese students stay in the U.S. and they contribute. So that is a big issue. And that is something that maybe it won't impact us this year, but 2 years, 5 years, it will be a major factor in our economy.
Shipley. Madam Shipley, small in size New Zealand will be an alternative place for Chinese students. Is that the right choice?
Well, we have an enormous number, and they are highly valued for all the reasons that have just been explained. We welcome them. They're an important part of both the education service industry, and it's a good example of a service rather than a production as in goods. These are services we sell, but we gain enormously from their presence as well. I would regret enormously if we saw the numbers reduce, although I do observe China has many, many and expanding numbers of outstanding educational institutions, and that wasn't the case 20 years ago when many students were coming abroad to do further their studies. But to the point, the cross-pollination of our cultural understanding and our economic exploration of the future assists everybody. It breaks down barriers. I think it helps de-risk a number of the things that we are seeing right now. I just got one other thing to add around the word of loss of jobs. If you look at the children who are being produced out of the education system today, I think we have to help them with the language. I mean, China is leading by educating such a large proportion of your population, and the statistics are outstanding. But we need to be educating them for change, not for the status quo, because the work they do will evolve. The roles they take will change. And so I think the young people and even established workers, rather than thinking about being redundant, We need to have this expectation of constant evolution and adjustment. And I think if we do that, the transition is entirely manageable.
Yes, the Industrial Revolution based on digital technology, the fourth of its kind, is gaining momentum in Asia in terms of two things. One is transformation from home-based business to more of a modern corporate governance, taking Guangdong, Fujian in the more prosperous coastal areas in China. As an example, the transformation is taking place fast and faster than in, say, Eastern China and Northern China. So from the point of view of Asian Development Bank, let's go back to what Mr. Gutierrez says earlier. The current decline in the number of Chinese students in Silicon Valley will be more harmful in terms of the future of the U.S. economy. What do you think of his comments?
Well, it's a proven fact that an ecosystem that supports creation, innovation, experimentation, what we call the freedom to fail, really that is the environment where talent will be attracted and talent will deliver. And I think that's been one of the greatest strengths of the US in the past, that it's an economy where you can just go and do your own thing, which means anything that is an artificial control is not likely to succeed in the end. The good thing is that good economics eventually prevails. So there is no arbitrage. Today the world is so connected that anybody who is protectionist is likely to be left behind. The rest of the ecosystem will certainly synergize. So I think today we are really poised for a 2 + 2 = 5 situation, and sooner than later I think people will realize that their best bet and their biggest gain lies in open borders, collaboration, integration, cooperation.
Mr. Ego, one hallmark of globalization is about the free flow of human resources across the border of traditional nation states, but due to the man-made barriers of protectionism in the age of deglobalization, what do you think of the outflow of human resources from Silicon Valley? Will ASEAN and other three member economies in the framework of 10+3 benefit enormously as a result?
Yes, I believe so. I think talent is very mobile, especially, so if they feel that they are not welcome in one particular place, they can move to another. And I think Silicon Valley is a great asset for the U.S. because it's able to attract some of the best talent. And if they were to put in measures that discourage people from coming, I think it's a loss to the U.S. rather than to the rest of the world. And so we have a lot of Asian students who are there who will think of coming back to the region. And I think another reason why that would happen is because Asia is the fastest growing region, right? If you look 10 years, 20, 15 years ahead, it's going to be the biggest economic bloc in the world. And so there will be a lot of jobs and opportunities created in the region. And I think this will be a magnet for people to come back to Asia as well. So when we talk about job losses, actually I think we're just looking at one segment of the economy, which is the manufacturing sector. That sector will obviously be, more and more automated. There'll be less and less job created in that particular area. But also don't forget that manufacturing has been fragmented. So a lot of the old manufacturing jobs has become services now. So what happens is the services part of the economy will grow enormously. And we've seen that happen, even with Uber, with Grabs and all that. They created a lot of jobs. In Singapore, for instance, there used to be about 25,000 taxis. Then when Uber and Grab came in, it expanded to 65,000 within a few years, right? And that's creating a lot of jobs, not necessarily very high-skilled jobs, but it created a lot of jobs. So, if you're going to say in the manufacturing, the game is you need to move up skill, right? You need to move up that. But there's a lot of demand for IT. Everywhere in Asia that I go, there's a shortage of skills. So I fully agree with your, idea that we need to have a program to upskill the labor force and to retrain them.
Mr. Gutierrez, yes, Vincent, go ahead.
Can I add one point here? I think with what's happening now, particularly with the U.S., I think we in Asia need to work closer together, because if, let's say, the Chinese from Silicon Valley is returning, their obvious choice would be going back to China because the market is there. But if we can work better with other countries like New Zealand, but because the New Zealand market is too small, so they might not be attracted. So I think the regional economy will need to be further enhanced so that people can work together and benefit together.
Further regional integration is, of course, an important issue on the agenda for leaders in Asia. Let's look at what happens recently in southern China with the completion of a big bridge that connects Hong Kong, Macau, and 9 cities in mainland China. We call the whole area Greater Bay Area. Will digital technology help connect the 3 parts further, Vincent?
Most definitely. I think the Greater Bay Area, I think it's a very brilliant concept of making this region closer. It's actually a very big economy already. It's 1.5 trillion US per annum. It's equivalent to like South Korea. And I think with closer collaboration and integration, I think this economy will be able to really move forward and hopefully set the stage for further growth for everybody else.
I wonder if this gentleman from Asia Development Bank agrees with Vincent about regional integration through the use of the digital technology. I mean, look at Japan, South Korea, and China. Do you think we are in the forefront of what we call the goose lineup? Yet another wave of industrialization other than the myth and the miracles concerning the success of the 4 little dragons in Asia in the 1970s and 60s even.
So I think ADB contributes in a very significant manner to the ASEAN centrality of a strong ASEAN, and there are several sub-initiatives under the ASEAN plus 3, under the Brunei, Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines, Thailand corridor, etc., etc. The idea is really to have a more integrated ASEAN region. As it is, I think intra-ASEAN trade is 25% of their total trade. So that's a very, very well integrated region, and I think that's the way to go. That's the way to grow. And ADB is contributing both in terms of this integration and in terms of promoting incubators and business development initiatives which are at the forefront of digital technology, among other things. But just to make one more point on the jobs, that was the last thing, we are underestimating the amount of jobs that education, health, especially elderly care is going to create over the next decade. We somehow seem to equate jobs with manufacturing or regular services. That's not the case. Today, the world is suffering from lifestyle diseases, cholesterol, blood pressure, diabetes, heart disease, and we have to move from medicine to preserving health. That's a very large sector, and I think that's where governments have to come in and create opportunities, create networks. That will be a very big opportunity.
Yes, indeed, education helps. Prime Minister, how will digital technology impact government policies?
One of the frightening things about public policy is that it really is ahead of innovation. And I think this is a huge challenge, to be honest, because the ability to create enormous capability, and we're on the edge of 5G, which will be the Internet of Things and take us into another sphere, public policy is trying to catch up. I don't know how you can solve this, by the way, but I think that we need to stick to evidence-based work as we consider whether it's a Huawei or a Ericsson or a Nokia type offering. Get past the anxiety of suspicion and into the evidence so that governments can confidently evaluate innovation that's coming into the market so they can make decisions. Because even in a developed economy like New Zealand, which is well connected, innovation is going faster than in the public sector, if it's the truth of the matter, it's not a criticism, it's just a reality. I think collaboration across the region around how we will adopt and facilitate innovative platforms and then the use of those platforms to get to the future we're speaking about, it's ripe for the RCEP, the new RCEP, I beg your pardon, type organisation. And we would have thought historically RCEP was a trade-related relationship. But those relationships need to move to trade and services type relationship, where we think about how can we collaborate across platforms to enable the region in the way that you're describing. And in my opinion, it's essential for financing as well, because if you look at the development of this region we're talking about, it's mainly public sector money that's funding infrastructure, for example. It doesn't appear to me, and I'm generalizing here, but I think it's an important point. At the moment, we don't appear to see the private sector with great confidence sharing the huge investments that are required in order to get the development that we're speaking about. And I think a highly innovative collaboration across this region in digital terms would then bring private sector financiers in with more confidence, because more transparent, data's more available. If there are layers of collaboration of funding, I think we'll get further more quickly. And this is not to criticise the ADB or anyone else, but it is a tipping point when you know that development's going to be rampant, when the private sector follows and comes in as a willing partner on multiple levels to fund the infrastructure we're discussing.
We have to focus more on digital economy. Vincent, I believe you have made enough money through the previous decades of real estate development in the mainland. What would be the next opportunity for you to make money in the mainland and in Asia at large?
With a growing economy like China, I think you can make money from a lot of different sectors. It's a matter of whether you have that competitive edge. And I'm not thinking so much about making money anymore. I'm more thinking about, okay, what can we do to help the world to be a better place for everybody? And on that point, I believe the Belt and Road is going to become the most important initiative for the 21st century.
One way to help improve the world, I'm afraid, is the enhancement of individuality through the use of the internet. You level the playing field between the elites and ordinary folks in the society at large. And most of those who spend hours and hours on the keyboard each passing day, will be those who have been found redundant in the transformation of our industries. So, Mr. Gutierrez, in the Rust Belt, you have the white deplorables, and do you think digital economy, digital technology will be more of an opportunity for those who are die-hard supporters of President Donald Trump? And what does that mean for the flow of labor force between the United States and China across the Pacific?
You know, I want to go back because I didn't answer your question about what percent of the 40% is from Asia. I would say about 80 to 90% are from two countries, China and India. So I owed you that answer. Rust Belt will be impacted tremendously. And that is President Trump's base, as you said. There's no question that manufacturing, basic manufacturing, will be done through robotics, through AI. But we're also looking at a phenomenon where there's also white-collar job displacements. Lawyers reviewing contracts, accountants doing the books. So this is a trend that's going to impact the top and the bottom. And it's not just manufacturing workers. They will be displaced unless we retrain. If I can just say one thing, because I totally agree about the government and the private sector. We talk about R&D, and for companies, R&D. There's R, which is research. That is long-term. Companies don't have the financial patience or the competitive patience. The government needs to play a role in basic research. development is what companies do. So they take the research of the government and they bring it to life. They bring the magic, they bring the iPhone, they bring all these incredible products, but the two have to work together, and we can't just assume that it's the government or assume that it's Silicon Valley.
Mr. Gupta, with the rise in labor costs, commodity prices, we see ongoing relocation of R&D centers of overseas multinationals from mainland China to low-income economies on our periphery in Asia at large. What does that mean for the future of the vibrant Asian economy?
Asia is abundant both in terms of headcount.
I raise this issue in the context of actually more investment from SoftBank, Alibaba, Tencent, these giants in the emerging markets and poor economies. We're talking about digital economy in Asia.
So I think there is adequate talent, and of course different countries are at different level of evolution, which is an opportunity. So the good thing about economic activity is that it does not like an arbitrage. If there is a gap, it will automatically flow to where it is. So I mean, that's how China was the manufacturing hub of the world, and now I think China is already seeing some of that going away to other Asian countries which are competitive just because China has evolved. And I think that will continue, and that will really not be meaningful if we are an integrated region, because that's when the flow will be abetted, it will be encouraged, and that's when the benefits will again flow to the entire community. So I think that is what will happen, that is what has been happening, and it's not something that we need to be fearful about at all. The governments will, I say, just as you have a public-private partnership, there are straight-jacketed roles which the private sector and the public sector have to play, and I think regulation is a very large part in which governments have to work together, because along with digital technology, it's like cooking gas. Coal was not risky. With gas you can have an explosion. That doesn't mean that gas is risky and we won't use it. It's just that we need a structure around containing those risks. So things like identity theft, intellectual property theft, etc., etc., those are things, base erosion and profit sharing, avoidance of taxation, because on the online system you can actually avoid value-added taxes. You can actually flow millions and billions of dollars across borders, affecting the economies that are those currencies. So I think regulation will have to take care of these aspects, and there again collaboration amongst the governments is the key. Without that, we don't get anywhere.
Mr. Khor, do you think digital technology would help create the digital gap, or the other way around, it will help close the gap between poor and rich?
I think the government has a job to do to try to close the gap. The gap will emerge, obviously, but one of the features of the new technology is that it's becoming easier and easier to use, right? So Alibaba, Tencent, and all that, they come up with these fantastic apps that are really quite intuitive, right? So in a way, the technology company are making a tremendous effort to make it very easy to use. So as a result, I think the gap that we traditionally think about IT, very advanced, technical, has been breached by the technology company themselves, right? But there's still a role, I think, for the government to try to bring technology to the poor people, right? And this has been done through the iPhone, for instance. Now the iPhones are very cheap and almost everybody can afford it. You have all kinds of apps on the phone that they can use in a very intuitive way. So maybe the gap will not be as large as we think, but certainly, people who are working in traditional sectors of the economy will have to be brought up, into the new services economy, and that's a role that I think the government can play in terms of reskilling, upskilling, and also improving that.
We've been talking about the importance of different players, such as non-public investment and also government policy support. Prime Minister, let's look at 5G, a most controversial flashpoint in the world. New Zealand is one of the Five Eyes one member of the Five Eye Alliance and has made it very clear for a while that you would bar Huawei from being part of your market.
No, that's not correct.
No, that's not correct. Correct my mistake if I've got the misinformation. But how do you look at the importance of 5G in changing the digital landscape in Asia?
Look, 5G, and I'm no expert on this, but I've looked at it enough and have been involved in enough industries where the enabling capability of it is going to be transformational. It will connect our world in a way that's going to change forever. We need to get this, there's two questions. I don't want to get distracted on Huawei and New Zealand, but just to make the point, I think if we can stick to the evidence, so if we need to explore whether these things are fair or not, or transparent or not, we should have a process where each country is not forced into making an arbitrary decision, but rather is enabled through information and insight to say, well, I'll have this or that. I personally also support competitive processes, so you know the attributes and whatever you're buying. I do think governments have a role to roll this capacity out, because 5G certainly will enable cities. It's perhaps not as useful in remote areas, but it is inevitably going to enable those people who are closely congregated. And I agree with the point just made. I do believe that 5G is going to create enough capacity that people who have been very marginalised in the economy, that this is a gap that's going to close. The powerful, in the controlling of their assets, human capital, and the ability to be able to demonstrate your talent, and someone who's a digital provider to then analyse that and reward you without showing that you've got land or property or this or that, is transformational. And in my opinion, we are right on the threshold of some really interesting closing the gap type potential. However, we've got to get over the how do you roll it out over Southeast Asia so that Indonesia and everyone else has the same opportunity that China did? One of the great decisions China made was to enable the telecommunications network early so that people were connected to markets and markets to people. And if you send that privilege across the other areas of undeveloped Asia and allow them to be connected, people, I'm talking about ordinary people connected to markets and markets to people, because that's what technology does. They're not just the market at the corner, they're in the market of the world. And so enabling the scope of the infrastructure so people can participate. Governments have got to do the big piece, and then I think the private sector and human capital will just unleash itself across the platforms if we can get there.
Mr. Gutierrez, so as I'm concerned, President Donald Trump is worried about several things. First of all, the new world order in the 21st century. Second, importance of 5G and other corresponding high technology that may help reshape the world and the world order. That has a lot to do whether the United States leadership will be sustained with the rise of protectionism and unilateralism, particularly disputes that are taking place between Europeans and Americans, between the United States and your two neighbors, Canada and Mexico. You can raise a number of examples to illustrate the conundrum and dilemma that President Trump faces at the moment when we look into the future. So what do you think of 5G? That is one of the major issues between the two countries, China and the United States, particularly with regard to the trade war.
I have a big problem with the way it's being managed, because there's a perception that 5G, all these new digital technologies, are country versus country.
Yeah.
It's China versus the U.S., and if China gets it first, China will dominate the U.S. It is really about companies versus companies. And it's going to be Alibaba versus Amazon. And if Alibaba has access to 5G before Amazon, that is a commercial advantage for Alibaba, and that's the way business works. But this idea that it's government versus government, I think is unfounded. And at the end of this, it's going to be made, and it's going to be made possible by companies. whether they be private or public, but not governments against governments, unless we're getting into use of robotics for other things, but that's probably a separate conversation.
But undeniably, this is not very quiet competition in high-tech area between the United States and China is allegedly politically motivated, politically charged, and therefore you have good reasons to question the way things are managed. Having said this, Vincent, as a Chinese, do you think that we have more advantages in showing up 5G? For example, we have a big data, cloud computing, and more talk. You read lips of so many investors, entrepreneurs in the mainland. Everybody is talking about AI, big data. Do you think we have this particular advantage in shaping and reshaping the future of the world?
Definitely, because the market is there, and then you have companies like Huawei, which is really leading the world. I visited one of their research plant, and very, very impressive. But unfortunately, even the vice president of the US is going around the world to say, stop using Huawei. How could that be the case? I believe, of course, with the leadership in 5G, it might benefit Huawei as a company, but it's still got to serve all the different customers in different regions and countries. Otherwise, it's no use.
Should I go back to what Mr. Gutierrez said about the competition between companies, technology companies? Since we live in the age of a global supply chains and value chains, we're going to have a more value-added industries in the what we call fourth industrial revolution. So, Mr. Khor, what should be done to level the playing field and to lay the groundwork for healthy development of a global supply chain? The understatement of my question is obviously referring to the alleged efforts by President Trump to decouple the Chinese economy. But given the sizable market of up to perhaps 700 to 800 million middle-class consumers in the Chinese market, is it easy job to decouple the Chinese economy in the age of digital technology?
Yeah, I think that's the real challenge for the US, right? Because it's obvious that in the next 10-15 years, the middle class in Asia is going to grow even bigger. They already have they're going to get richer, they're going to spend more, and so this is where the market is, right? And so despite all this protectionist movement against trade, I think Asia will continue to integrate. There's no escaping that. And there will be risk that comes along with it. And those risks have to be managed. And I think this will give an impetus to the Asian Economic Community project.